Good morning, gentlemen. We all have heavy hearts this morning, as has been discussed over and over again. In Colorado, our thoughts and prayers go out to you and our soldiers and all the Army families at Fort Hood. I think we've also been in awe of the heroes among heroes who responded to the tragic events of yesterday. The valor of those first responders comes as no surprise to many of us. In my home state of Colorado, we've just been in awe as our soldiers have deployed over and over again to combat in Afghanistan. They've trained our allies. They've tracked the enemies of humanity during the counter-Lord's resistance army operations in Africa. And they've saved many lives and much of what we hold dear in Colorado while battling both wildfires and floods over the last year. And they've been great neighbors and friends, to say the least. And we're just so lucky to have them these heroes living amongst us. And we're forever grateful for what they do day in and day out. I've got great respect for the brave men and women in your sister services, and there's no denying the importance of air and sea power, but the simple fact is the missions I've just described require soldiers who bring boots onto the ground, and that's why I'm worried about the potential cuts in the Army's end strength and the effect those cuts would have on our soldiers, our ability to project power, and our very communities. I'm also increasingly disturbed by the public conflict between the active component and the National Guard. If there's one thing we've learned over the last several years, it's that we need a well-trained, well-equipped, multi-component Army. We're also facing the potential, as we've been discussing here this morning, for significant budget-driven reductions if Congress doesn't get its act together and we don't stop sequestration from kicking back in next year. In light of that, we literally can't afford a delay in the critical decisions that are before us while a committee spends months or years conducting a study for the sake of a few attack battalions. If we freeze force structure changes to the Guard, we'll still have to absorb cuts through even deeper reductions in strength and iron on the active side. And in my mind, that's not a responsible compromise. This is a complex and emotionally charged issue, and we're not going to solve it by going to war with ourselves. I think of Winston Churchill, if I can paraphrase him. He said, "We're out of money. It's time to start thinking." So with that in mind, I've got some questions. Mr. Secretary, let me start with you, and I want to thank you publicly for agreeing to my request to withdraw the Army's request for a land acquisition waiver for the Pinyon Canyon training area. With the Pinyon Canyon controversy finally put to rest, our soldiers will be able to conduct the training they so need while our ranchers can do their vital work without fear of losing their land. It's a rare win-win scenario, and I was proud and honored to work with you and your team to make it a reality. And I know the great people at Fort Carson will make good use of that training area, and I know they'll continue to work to protect the land for themselves and future generations. So with all of that in mind, would you describe the types of training that our soldiers need to conduct to prepare for full spectrum operations, and what are your main concerns about the threats facing the current and future force? And then if I could, on that note, how does access to quality training areas like Pinyon Canyon factor into the Army's assessments of installations?
Thank you, Senator. Let me, first of all, return the compliment. Not just I, but all of us in the Army greatly appreciated the leadership, the courage, really, that you consistently showed on resolving the Pinyon Canyon issue. I totally agree with you. It's win-win, and we can all get back to what it concerns us most, in our case, soldiering and training those soldiers, in the case of farmers and ranchers doing God's work out on the land. So thank you for those efforts. As you noted, suggested in recent years, our focus on training has really been on the counterterrorism initiative. That's recently switched to a train and assist mission, and that, coupled with the fact that we just have had dwindling resources, has really caused us to greatly diminish the complexity of our training and to, by and large, not have the funds to do decisive action training. We are utilizing our return, of course, out of Iraq, but also out of Afghanistan to now return to decisive action training, a more complex training the type of mission sets that the chief spoke about earlier. We'll have 19 CTC rotations this year. 17 of those will be for decisive action training. That is in no small measure thanks to the relief that this Congress provided through the bipartisan budget agreement for 14 and 15. But as the chief said, if we go back to 16, those kinds of buybacks will be immediately lost, and we'll have to do the best training we can at a much lower level of proficiency and complexity. The chief went into some detail about how the more complex missions require larger troop formation sets, require the integration of fires and infantry and your overhead close air support, et cetera, et cetera. And in the case of our attack platforms, for example, we are integrating unmanned aerial platforms, the Gray Eagle, which adds even more complexity. So the ability to do that kind of training, you need land, you need clear airspace, and while the major portion of those occurs at Fort Polk and out at the CTC in California, obviously the training opportunities at Pinyon Canyon have and remain vital, and the stability that the recent agreement brings, I think, will obviously be a consideration should we get to a point where we begin to evaluate bases for possible drawdown. As you know, that's a very complex system and it's interrelated, but every asset that a post-camper station can bring to the table is something on their side.
Again, I think this is a great example of everybody sitting down, listening, and working out a way forward. So again, I want to thank you. And General, let me direct a question to you that I think you can answer for the record because my time's about to expire. But I want to return to the National Guard force structure comments I made, and I know you spoke to this as well. If the Army were prevented from making those changes pending the findings of the independent commission, what would the ripple effect be? The money would have to come from somewhere. So am I right in saying that there would be significant effects on the active Army and or the Army Reserve?
There would be, but up to $12.7 billion over the POM, over the entire period.
All right, so you answered the question. We don't need to ask the question for the record, so thank you. Thanks again for your service and for being here, gentlemen.